tax the rich. Is this the path to our salvation, or is it a just massive waste of time? What do you think, William?
Well, we're probably about to find out with this video that we're going to react to, but
Yeah.
I think that that's not a very good idea overall. Even if you taxed all of the big money, people,
Mm-hmm.
all of their money basically,
Mm-hmm.
you still would not pay off the debt basically at all.
Yeah. Our annual debt, not just the
Yeah,
cumulative debt.
the total amount of debt in this country is more than
Yeah.
anybody can literally imagine.
Yeah. It's funny because we've talked about this a lot on the channel, and we might say, well, could we tax marginally? We could probably tax people differently, but will it make a meaningful difference? And the answer is no. We've done the math. We've looked at not only taxing 100% of billionaire wealth, but confiscating all their wealth, forcing them to sell all their assets and
Also, there's
taking all
commas.
their wealth. It still doesn't get us very far. It gets us like a year or two
Yeah.
in terms of our annual budget deficit, not even the annual budget itself, just the deficit part. So people just can't comprehend this. And so they want to hate on something. And so they hate on the rich. But let me ask you this question,
Mhm.
William, before we get into this. I've got a video that is really good in
Yes,
terms of breaking it down.
I trust
Okay.
that.
And these people do a much better job of it than we can. So before we get into that though, let me ask you something. As a young man, who do you that is alive,
Mm.
that is not me, who do you admire the most in this world?
There's a few people.
Okay.
Out of the people that I would say that are currently alive,
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk would probably be one of the top ones
Yep. Okay.
because he is a nerd and
Mm-hmm.
he loves, and when I say loves, he loves tech and engineering and finding out new things. He
Yeah.
literally made a rocket that can land itself,
Yes. Reusable
self-driving
rockets.
cars, right? He's he's the man of the century,
Yes. It's hard to
basically.
argue against that. Yeah. And then he bought Twitter. He basically saved free speech by buying Twitter with his own money.
He is the goat.
He's going to be a difficult one to replace. Yeah. I mean, it made reusable rockets. He's made electric cars. And this is what's interesting to me because a lot of times people will say, well, billionaires, they shouldn't have their money, but they start companies and their money is primarily in stock. It's in the company. It's not like they just have $400 billion liquid.
Yes.
So it's in their companies and they don't want to give up interest in their companies because they are running the company. They want to have the controlling interest in the company that they created. But think about this because people will always say, well, he didn't do it. It's easy for him. But it's easy to say that when somebody is already at sort of the finish line. You could
Yeah.
you could you could say like Walmart, that family, they didn't start with Walmart, right? They started with a local grocery store and they expanded and they expanded and they expanded. And so if you are not happy with your current situation, you could do the same thing. You could compete against Walmart. You could leverage your life savings, leverage your IRA,
Yeah.
mortgage your home, right? And start your own grocery chain and try to expand it, just as they did. And the same with Elon Musk. He didn't just make a new car. He went up against the juggernaut of the auto industry. Ford, Chevrolet, Chrysler, and
All
made
of the
an
big
electric
guys.
car and became the most popular car in the country. Think about like his other project of making reusable rockets and going up against
SpaceX, yeah.
NASA, a government subsidized agency. I'm going to just do better
Like
than NASA. It's crazy. But
and
he did it.
he's doing better than them even. He's made more progress basically than them within the last
Yeah.
10 years effectively.
Yeah, he
Like
had to save people from the International Space Station because NASA couldn't. And
wow.
and he's got other projects. But nonetheless, like people want to hate on success and I think it's disgusting. But let's do this. Let's get into the video because even if you want to hate on success, if you're one of those people, then what we'll go through the math with you because you need successful people. In fact, we need billionaires in our society because they employ people. In fact, they employ something like 15 million people in this country. And almost 70% of billionaires are self-made. You know that?
That would make sense.
They were not born into money. And so these are true like pioneers, entrepreneurs, innovators. They're doing really cool stuff. Okay,
They're
let's
GSDing.
they are GSDing. And I find it disgusting that we don't celebrate them versus villainizing them. But nonetheless, let's go through this because I think this breaks it down very nicely in terms of it's not even mathematically possible. All right.
Yes.
Taxing the rich fix the budget deficit? Whenever debates arise over
Oop.
how to fix the soaring federal debt, many on the political left, and even some on the populist right, invariably say, easy, just tax the rich.
Max Bridge.
But is it really that easy? Can those
AOC.
budget deficits of
Rich,
nearly
come
$2
on.
trillion headed toward $4 trillion annually within a decade simply be closed by higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations?
Yeah, the rich got to pay their
answer
fair
is an
share.
emphatic no. And it's not a question of ideology. It's not a question about picking winners and losers. It's just math.
Yeah, I like math.
We've said this so many times. It is just math.
To be clear, we can tax the rich more. And in fact, taxing the rich can absolutely be part of a broader deficit grand deal, where all taxes and spending are up for debate. But it could only ever be a modest part of a grand deal, because the potential revenue available from taxing the rich can close only a small portion.
Well, there's something, I don't think they go through it in this video. It's called the Laffer curve, meaning rich people will only tolerate being taxed up to a certain point, and then they find other ways to make money or they
Oh,
leave.
really?
Yeah.
Of our nearly unfathomable deficits. Let's begin with an extreme example. America has about 800 billionaires. Let's imagine we seized every single dollar of their wealth.
That's what we
Every
just said.
home, property,
Yeah.
business,
Seize it all.
investment, car,
Even-
yacht,
Not
all
even
right
like
down to their
tax it,
kids'
just
teddy
take it
bears.
all.
Just
And
take
we
it all.
sold
Even
it all
unalive
for
them and take
full
it all.
market value. That would raise
This is
enough
what the
revenue to
communists want,
finance
David.
the federal government for 9 months. Not 9 months out of every
9
year.
months.
9 months one time. Then, with no billionaires left to pillage, it's gone. Oh, and so is your 401k, because most of that wealth would have been liquidated out of the stock market. Even taxing million-dollar earners at 100% marginal tax rates wouldn't balance the long-term budget, even if each of those taxpayers continued working optimally for zero net pay. Only slightly more realistically, imagine that President Bernie Sanders gets to implement his dream tax proposal. We're talking his proposal of federal income tax rates as high as 52%, an uncapped 15.3% payroll tax on all wages, and capital gains tax rates of 62%.
Yeah,
Plus,
those are
the state
insane.
tax rates on top of those. And we'd also hit corporations with a world-leading 35% corporate tax
World-leading,
rate
highest
that
tax in the
includes
world.
all multinational income. A wealth tax rate as high as 8%, and a state tax rate as high as 77%. New financial transaction taxes, and that's only the beginning of
The
That is insane. I could
Bernie
not.
Sanders doesn't like the oligarchs.
I
countless other
cannot imagine
surtaxes.
having that much
Basically,
taxes.
You're better off then to just be a commoner and not have any
Like,
drive.
yeah, why even try if basically all of your money is just gonna be taken from you?
Yeah.
income, capital gains,
keep watching.
business, wealth, and
They
estate
lay
tax
it out
rates would
here really
all
good.
be set at the highest rate in the developed world. And the total new revenues would be approximately 1.5% of GDP. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough to close more than a fraction of a current policy budget deficit heading towards 8% of GDP in the next decade. And even
Bingo.
those revenue figures implausibly assume that people and corporations would continue working, saving, and investing despite combined federal and state marginal tax rates on labor and investment that would approach 80% to 100%. Actual tax
Spending
revenues would
problem.
likely increase by about 1.5% of GDP. 2 years ago, I ran a model that set every upper income and corporate tax policy at its revenue maximizing level without regard to economic damage. It showed roughly 1.5% of GDP in
Man.
new revenues and much
Crazy.
slower economic growth. It's a terrible trade-off. The mathematical reality is that there just aren't enough millionaires, billionaires, and undertaxed corporations to close a 30-year budget deficit
We need more billionaires.
Yeah, exactly,
of
right?
between $115 trillion and $180 trillion, depending on the baseline we use. It just isn't possible to finance annual deficits heading to $4 trillion in a decade and 14% of GDP over the next 30 years on the
Will, do you know that the top 1% of earners in this country pay 40% of all the taxes?
I think I've heard of that before.
Do Do you know that the bottom 50% of earners in the country pay no tax?
Wait, really?
Effectively, yes. So if
That's
you're
not fair.
if you're in the bottom 50% of wage earners in the country, you're not paying any tax. But if you're in the top 1%, you're paying 40% of all taxes.
All total
Yeah.
taxes. That's
Backs of
crazy.
corporations and only 5% of American families.
So
There
like
just
you can
are
say
not
tax people more, but that's a pretty we have one of the most progressive tax systems in the world.
enough
Mhm.
super rich people to pay for the other 300 million of us. And most of the available tax base resides in that large middle class. The
Mhm.
surprising secret no one seems to talk about is that the tax code is already extraordinarily progressive. It's the most progressive tax code in the OECD,
Yeah.
Oh,
and it's
See?
grown radically more progressive over the past 40 years. Most of the nation's total income comes from families earning under $400,000. And their dramatically lower current tax rates mean that the large majority of the available remaining tax base resides within the tens of millions of these families. No one likes the idea of raising middle class taxes, but there is only so much revenue to raise from the wealthy. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. How can this be? What about those old 91% tax rates from the 1950s? What about Europe's tax
Have you ever heard about this? Back after World War II, we taxed people at a 90% tax rate.
that's
It's crazy.
that
However,
is actually insane.
do you know there's a difference between what they call effective tax rate and marginal tax rate? A marginal tax rate is the tax rate that is published that says this is what we're going to charge you, but an effective tax rate is what you actually pay after tax exempt claims
Mm.
and loopholes and things like that. And so what I think they're going to walk through here is that people really didn't pay higher taxes then.
rich social democracies? What about those millionaires and corporations that paid nothing last year? Okay, let's take these one at a time. Start with those old 91% income tax rates in the 1950s. Those income tax systems raised only 7.2% of GDP in federal income tax revenues. As the top tax bracket fell to 70% in the 1960s and 70s, income tax revenues actually rose to
Yeah.
around 7.8% of GDP. And since all the dramatic reductions of the top income tax rate starting in 1981, federal income tax revenues have averaged 8.1% of GDP. So, Washington collects more income tax revenues as a share of GDP today with a top bracket of 37% than it
Mhm.
collected in the 1950s with a 91% tax bracket.
Right.
In fact, since 1950, the correlation between the highest income tax bracket and revenues as a share of the economy is negative 0.25%, meaning that higher top tax rates are correlated with lower income tax revenues.
Yeah.
How can that be? Well, it turns out that the highest income tax brackets don't tell us much about total income tax revenues. What matters more are the income thresholds for every tax bracket, the amount of tax preferences and tax deductions, whether the tax system encourages tax avoidance and tax evasion, and, most important, broader economic growth rates. If you want more tax revenues, look there. You see, almost no one actually paid those old 91% tax rates,
Right.
which kicked in at today's
makes sense.
equivalent of a $4.1 million annual income. In 1961, that was just 446 families, and
Wow.
it raised just 0.1% of all income tax revenues. In fact, all of the tax brackets between 52% and 91% collectively produced just 1% more income tax revenue than if we had capped those tax brackets at 50%.
So it was all a
Those
show. When they had the tax rates that high, it was all a show for the people to say, "Oh yeah, we're getting all these rich people," but it really didn't.
brackets won't even pay for 2 days a year of
The
federal
truth
spending.
is, we need
If
rich
you
people.
want 91% tax rates, go ahead, but don't point to 1950s America as proof that they work. But surely Europe has figured it out. They know how to build large welfare states
no.
on the backs of the
yeah,
rich,
Oh, Europe.
right?
Right where you don't
Wrong
wanna be.
again. They do it by taxing the middle class. Europe just isn't the caricature Americans imagined decades ago. The average OECD nation does collect 7.5% of GDP more in tax revenues than the US across all levels of government. And virtually the entire gap is explained by every other OECD nation assessing a value-added tax, essentially a sales tax, as high as 27%. That typically raises 7.2% of GDP. So not counting the VAT, US and European tax revenue.
Do you know what that means? A value-added tax? It's a tax on anything you buy, meaning anything that's had value added to it.
That makes more sense, yeah.
Yeah. And some nations prefer that because then you're actually taxing consumption rather than earnings. So I don't know if you know what that means, but like when you go do yard work and I pay you $20, that's earnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you want to go to the yogurt store and spend $10 on yogurt, you would pay tax on that, meaning you'd pay tax on a value added tax on things that are essentially consumption or they're optional. You don't have to do them. Like you could choose not to.
Okay, yeah.
So some people find that to be more like, builds more personal accountability in terms of how you want to live. Like you could defer your lifestyle, pay less in value added tax to live not as a extravagant a lifestyle, for example, and you won't pay as many taxes and just keep earning. That's an interesting way to drive, incentives for saving.
Are nearly equal. Even the social democratic Scandinavian countries that collect 14% of GDP more than the US do it almost entirely from their VAT and higher payroll taxes, which come from everyone, not just the rich. America's top tax brackets for income, capital gains, corporate, and estate taxes are actually slightly higher than the typical OECD nations when merging all levels of government. We've got the most progressive tax system in the OECD because we tax the rich at similar rates as those other countries, but we tax the middle and lower classes dramatically less than they do. The American middle class deals with far lower income and payroll tax rates. So, if you want America to tax like Europe, then our middle class is going to get the nastiest surprise of its life. That third common counterargument is to blame budget deficits on that billionaire or that corporation that reportedly paid no taxes last year. Every year, we get reports of a handful of corporations that paid little to no taxes last year, or those Warren Buffett pays less tax than his secretary stories. The corporate examples are often the result of shifting income and taxes from one year to the next, which means any real analysis should examine a corporation's taxes over a period of several years. And the corporations paying low taxes over many years are typically either earning most of their income abroad and paying foreign taxes, or taking advantage of tax breaks for business investment and R&D that politicians create to encourage those activities. Either way, eliminating those tax breaks and taxing these companies more could raise perhaps $100 billion a year. That's real money, but it's not a game changer in the context of those $4 trillion annual deficits we're heading towards. And of course, we'd lose the business investment and job creation that comes from those incentives. With rich individuals, it's absolutely true that much of their income is shifted into capital gains or borrowing against their wealth. The capital gains will eventually be taxed when it's sold, unless they carry it through to death. Ensuring that capital gains would be taxed at death, or that rich people can no longer easily borrow tax-free against their wealth, are possible reforms. But they wouldn't raise revenue of any significance to our deficits. None of this means we shouldn't tax the rich more. Fixing a ruinous deficit requires putting everything on the table, including higher taxes on the rich. Personally, I support closing the loophole that permanently exempts capital gains from taxation if they're held until death. And I also support dramatically scaling back upper income and corporate tax loopholes, and fully funding IRS audits against high earning and corporate tax cheats. But we've got to acknowledge the mathematical reality that our budget deficits have grown so massive that tax the rich policies can't close more than a tiny fraction of them. And
yeah.
Overall,
what do you think? What's your takeaway?
Overall, from that, it's much more obvious that taxing the rich is not the entire way to do, fix the debt or anything.
Yeah. It
like
looks
what
like
they want.
we're taxing the rich almost to the maximum level that we possibly could before there's exodus or
Before they start getting
disincentive.
mad, maybe, right?
Yeah. So
An interesting idea.
what do you think the problem is then? If we can't tax more, what else can we do?
Well, first of all, maybe we could stop spending as much and, stop spending $4 trillion per year, whatever is that now?
Six.
Six. That's even worse. How has that happened?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's one thing, maybe.
we could spend less, but do you think government will want to spend less? Who's willing to be the
Ooh,
guy or the gal in Washington that says, we should not spend as much?
they'd probably get a lot of backlash.
Yeah.
Thing is, then you'd have to decide if you do want to spend less, right? Then what would you cut, right? What would you cut
Yeah.
from? And then maybe you start cutting from like the military or something. Maybe then Republicans will get mad at you. But maybe then
Mhm.
you start cutting from like Obamacare or something. Oh, now the
Mhm.
Democrats are gonna start raging at you,
Yeah.
right?
Do you know how much of the budget those things are? We have the highest military budget
Budget,
maybe in the
yeah,
world, but our military
by
budget
like 3 times.
is 14% of our annual budget.
It's not as bad as I thought. I thought it was like 40 or something.
Right. No, military is like 14%. Now,
How about
interest on our debt, meaning we just the
isn't that
interest
like a few? It's like
it's 12%
yeah.
of our
So
annual
it's
budget. 62% of our annual budget is spent on entitlements, meaning
wait, really?
Obamacare, healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So these are
I never thought it was 62. I thought it was maybe like
almost two
less than 40, possibly.
almost 2/3 of our annual budget is spent on things that are essentially non-negotiable in terms of like entitlements to Americans. That's where all that stuff's at.
So
But
basically, 2/3 of it is just giving away.
it's yes, it's entitlements, meaning it's being given to people. So 2/3 of our budget is that. And then one eighth of it is military, another eighth of it is interest on the debt. And so we only have about 15% of the annual national budget that is discretionary, meaning it goes to education and goes to other programs and stuff. And so most of the budget is pretty much locked in,
Yeah.
and we can't do much with it except for this 15%. And so even if we cut the 15%, we're still overspending because we take on debt of a third
Mm-hmm.
a third of our budget each year. So whatever we spend each year, we put a third of it on the credit card. 33% of our budget is taken on in debt, but we only have 15% that's perhaps discretionary. So even if we cut all discretionary spending, 100% of it, that still means we're going to take on debt. So we would have to get our spending in line, we'd have to make difficult decisions on non-discretionary spending,
Mm-hmm.
like the military. We can't do much about interest on our debt because constitutionally we have to pay. And then we
Yeah.
have entitlements. And boy, it's not popular to take money away from people that are getting it.
Sadly. And I say sadly though, mainly because that's like the most amount of money.
Yes.
That seems slightly overboard. Like maybe Social Security can maybe say, I don't know. But like the entitlements and all that other stuff is kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
Social Security, yeah, the only reason why I say that is because, you have isn't it where like when every time like you get a paycheck, you have to pay a certain amount to
right.
Social Security, right?
Yes, you pay into it
So
when you're younger.
so like then the older generation, then if you do that, then they won't get their paycheck or
Yeah, I
whatever.
mean they've paid into it.
So
So
it's
the
that's the only that's like basically why I don't say Social Security
but
because it
that's
seems
why
slightly
it's
unfair.
that's why it's an entitlement, because they're entitled to it because they paid into it. And as taxpayers, we paid into the system, and so we're entitled to, if we run on hard times, Medicare and Medicaid and SNAP programs and stuff. So
Well, the difference is though between those is that Social Security you're getting money back. All the others you're getting like free things back, not money, right?
services, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
right, services,
services or
right?
food.
So if it's like also like then when you take out like when you then like how would I say this? When you then also get your paycheck, right? And then you then have to pay into the government and it says Social Security, that's for Social Security. Meanwhile, if like you're somebody and you pay it in, there's nothing specific that says for free Medicare or something,
Mm.
right? So it still doesn't even make any sense there. And also, then you're not like Social Security, right? You're getting money, as we said before. All the other stuff is basically just getting things back.
Mhm.
So I feel like it would make more sense if maybe you got money and then you're able to pay with that money for
Yeah.
something specific or whatever.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like food benefits or healthcare benefits, maybe if people got that in actual health savings accounts. That's one of the proposals that's up, is maybe people got that in health savings accounts. Like we don't really go to the doctor that much,
No.
but if we knew that all of our healthcare was free, we might go to the doctor for every little thing. So I don't know. It could change the way. I think there's gonna
There's
be
gonna have to be some
there's
debate about it.
there's gonna have to be some difficult decisions made, don't you think?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
definitely for me.
Otherwise, we'll just keep inflating the currency, and that's good. That's actually good for rich people, which is odd
Yeah.
because we take on more debt, and it's good for rich people because it inflates the currency, and they have assets, and the people who don't have assets,
Well,
everything's more expensive. So, yeah, it's a tough predicament that we're in.
yeah. I'll get through it
You're gonna
eventually.
fix it. Gen Alpha gonna fix it.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right,
kind of have no choice at this point.
that's right. Let's wrap it.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all
guys
for
all
tuning
very much
in.
for coming on.
Yep,
If you
like and
guys want
subscribe.
if you guys want some merch, go to gsd-nation.com, or as Dad said, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next time.